Remember that in those same years, thanks to some of the same folks who are now running Congress, we had weak regulation. We had little oversight. And what did it get us? Mortgage lenders that tricked families into buying homes they couldn't afford?
What we found in the banking case in Texas, SacuBank in Texas, discrimination in lending, discrimination in rendering mortgages. The bank has agreed to change its practices, as you heard from the Assistant Secretary. The bank has also agreed to a $2.1 billion agreement where they'll make $2.1 billion available to families who are low and moderate income across the country for mortgages. But aggressively to take a greater risk on these mortgages, yes. To give families mortgages who they would not have given otherwise, yes.
To get the loans at all. They wouldn't have...
They would not have qualified but for this affirmative action on the part of the bank, yes. With the $2.1 billion, lending that amount in mortgages, which will be a higher risk, and I'm sure there'll be a higher default rate on those mortgages than on the rest of the portfolio.
There was the Community Reinvestment Act, or CRA, passed in 1977 during Jimmy Carter's first year in office. The law increased oversight of financial institutions to ensure that they were giving credit to low-income families.
We're going to make sure those banks do it and they don't discriminate. But the law went overboard. Institutions made loans they probably didn't want to make because they couldn't seem racist. It empowered these community groups who would then bully the banks. Acorn bullied the banks.
Indeed, Acorn, the Associations of Community Organizers for Reform Now, would before long come up with a new tactic, challenging a thrift merger in Illinois, claiming they didn't make the kind of loans that Acorn felt were required under the CRA. A young community organizer named Barack Obama worked closely with the Acorn activists behind the new strategy.
I've been a community organizer and helped design programs at the ground level.
And that strategy worked. Acorn prevailed in court, and soon credit standards were being lowered across the country. While at first Fannie actually resisted buying up some of those shaky mortgages, at the tail end of the Clinton administration, Fannie Mae was told to substantially increase the percentage of those mortgages in its portfolio.
Acorn's attorney was, well, you guessed it, Barack Obama. Back in the 1990s, they used strong-arm tactics to force banks to give high-risk loans to low-income borrowers with bad credit.
Acorn uses militant tactics. They call it direct action. Sometimes Acorn will actually send people to a bank official's home. They'll scare him, they'll scare his kids. Again, all in an effort to get the banks to make these bad loans.
Do you think is to blame for this current mortgage and credit crisis? Who do we see about that?
Well, the original idea was a good one, which was, let's see if we can distribute risk more broadly and make it easier to provide loans to people who otherwise might not be able to get them.
What do you think of the Acorn scandal, and how do you think it will affect the election?
The Acorn scandal is a big one. Acorn has received over $760 million in fees alone. This is what we know about, and there's a lot of stuff that's still kind of bubbling up to the surface. But here's an organization that essentially helped strong-arm a lot of banks into making loans to people who couldn't pay them off, so the so-called ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets. At the heart of what has kind of brought about the financial collapse is this rather unconventional idea that we would just loan money out if a person had a pulse.
Whenever I've questioned his policies or his record, he's called me a liar. Rather than answer his critics, Senator Obama will try to distract you from noticing that he never answers the serious and legitimate questions he's been asked. But let me reply in the plainest terms that I know. I don't need lessons about telling the truth to the American people. And were I ever to need any improvement in that regard, I probably wouldn't seek advice from a Chicago politician. No, it's as if somehow the usual rules don't apply. And where other candidates have to explain themselves in their records, Senator Obama seems to think he's above all that. Whatever the question, whatever the issue, there's always a backstory with Senator Obama. Who is the real Barack Obama?
As infuriating as it was for all of us, we rescued our major banks from collapse. But part of the deal was that we wouldn't go back to business as usual. And that's why last year we put in place new rules of the road that refocus the financial sector on what should be their core purpose: getting capital to the entrepreneurs with the best ideas and financing millions of families who want to buy a home, and financing millions of families who want to buy a home. And we're not all the way there yet. And the banks are fighting us every inch of the way. But already, some of these reforms are being implemented. If you're a big bank or a risky financial institution, you now have to write out a living will that details exactly how you'll pay the bills if you fail, so that taxpayers are never again on the hook.
There you go again.
Who is the real Barack Obama?